Right, now I'm working through where to put all the wiring, where's the best place for a certain component, and then where all the wires go. What I'm settling in on at the moment is having the speed controller over here. You can see with the floor pan makes it really useful additional mount points, because you've got these big flat areas that you can stick double-sided tape or Velcro tape onto. Then I've got some signal wires that are going to run along this side. I'm trying to keep all the radio signals on this side of the truck and the big power connectors on that side, just to separate them, trying to reduce interference. You'll notice there's 2 battery packs. Normally I'll probably have the battery front mounted, but I do have the option of having it on the back if I want to. And also for really long running, I can have 2 batteries and wire them in parallel. The receiver itself is going to go in the receiver box. I did have to do a bit of extra work on that. I've had to, with a Dremel, cut out, you see the hole here, and make it quite a lot larger than the standard hole, because this big lump of all the 6 wires and Plastidip just wouldn't fit in the standard hole coming out of the receiver box. So that'll be going there, and I've got some little bits of foam I've just cut, and they're going to wedge the receiver in there to stop it rattling around. Just on the back of the receiver box we've got the 3 racing winch controller. That's just going to double-sided tape onto the back of that, and then I have to work out what to do about all of the other additional wires for the winch controller and light controllers and so on. Right, sticking some double-sided tape on now, just in case you're curious. The double-sided tape I'm using, it's quite thin black double-sided tape I got off of eBay. You'll find this on eBay if you just search for double-sided tape black. It's the kind of stuff they use to stick on car number plates. I think that's 12mm wide and some 6. I've just finished sticking the 3 racing winch controller onto the back of the receiver box there, and the ESC is now stuck in place, and I'm just about to tie wrap. There's some of these little ties here. That's that one fixed on there, and those wires are nice and solid on there now. If I plug it in and out, I'm not moving the wires on the ESC, and when I've finished, the Plastidip, which you may just be able to see slightly peeling off at the bottom of those wires, I'll touch those up later. Another little useful product tip for you, if you've not seen these things before, these are plastic mounts that have double-sided tape on the back, and they give you a couple of through points, so you can tape this down onto your vehicle somewhere and take a tie wrap, and the tie wrap can go through the mount, and then obviously you can put your wires through there and then tie wrap over your wires like that. And these are fantastic. You can just stick them wherever you've got a good fixing point. Carrying on working out where the wires are going, just wanted to show you a couple of things. I've got the car plugged in at the moment. You can see on the ESC there we've got the light showing through the clear Plastidip, and there's the receiver inside there, and you can see again the little window we've cut through the black Plastidip that is letting us see what's going on. For those of you who've been following my build series, you may be thinking, why am I plugging in this 3 racing light controller? Because I found it doesn't work with this Orange RX transmitter because of its 20 millisecond frame rate. One thing I have noticed, although it won't control all of the turn signals and so on, when I go in reverse, it is working the reverse light, so at least I can get one channel switched off of this thing. No brake lights and no indicators, unfortunately, until I can afford a new radio. Bit more progress to show you, and another tip. This is the ESC stuck on down here now, and I've taken the signal wire that goes to the receiver and threaded some of this stuff onto it. It's just heat shrink tubing. You can pick this up on places like eBay or hardware stores and so on. And I've run the heat shrink tubing all the way down to pretty much the base of the connector where it was Plastidipped, and then all the way to the other end, and then just slightly over the connector there. So as that plugs in, that takes the heat shrink tubing right up to there. Now when I've got my final position for this connector, I'll cover that in Plastidip, so that end's sealed up, and then down on this end I've Plastidipped over the end of the heat shrink tubing, so that's a completely sealed tube now. So that's a nice waterproof radio wire to the ESC. This other wire coming out the ESC here, this is a wire I've added on. There's a little riser here that's a 6-volt output for a fan supply. I'm going to use that to power the lights on the truck, or at least I hope to. And again, heat shrink tubing on that to a JST connector I've mounted on there. And that's going to plug into, on the other side of the truck here, here are two HOK LED controllers, and they take signals from the radio on one side, and then they switch an input power source, and then they power whatever's coming out here. So to power that, I'm going to plug this JST connector into there. It's powered off the ESC, and length of heat shrink tubing will go over that like so, shrink wrapped on and then Plastidip on top. Should that not work out and I get any power problems, I can just unplug that JST connector, and I'm going to wire a separate BEC in, a Novak BEC, just to give me another 6-volt supply if this one's a bit dodgy. So that's those guys over there. The power wires coming from the ESC to the motor, 3 of those bullet connectors, they've been a big bit of heat shrink tubing, thicker diameter one, has gone over those, and then I've Plastidipped each end to seal that up. That's going to stick down there eventually, and the signal wire for the monitor wire for the motor, the sensor wire, is running down there. You can just about see it's clipped onto these clips that come on the SCX10 chassis. On the power side of things to the ESC, I've taken the normal power cable and I've wired on. I had a change of plan here. I've soldered on a big long extension piece of wire, and that's going to run, if I can show you this at an angle, that's going to run all the way under here, and I'll tie wrap it on there with a good fixing, all the way around to here, and then tapping onto that is going to be another wire. It's a big long wire. That's the power supply for the winch controller, so they're going to connect together on that end. And then I've got some tricky soldering to do. I've got some Dean's Ultra connectors here. Now I could just solder one of those on the end there, and that'll give me my battery connection, so I can connect the battery on. But I want to be able to run 2 batteries in parallel sometimes. I was going to have a little harness, a separate piece of wire that I could put in and take off, but I've decided to actually put the parallel connector right onto the ESC wire. So I need to get 2 of these together, kind of like that, actually around the other way, like that, and then the positive and negatives kind of bridge across solder and have these wires connecting into those like so. So I'll go and do that off camera. I'll probably burn myself if I try and film that. On the winch controller side of things, there's the winch controller stuck on the back of the receiver box, and its power wires coming out here, and that's going to run round to the front of the truck, and there's another JST connector there. What I'm going to do with the winch is, on this floor pan, you have a fake radiator here, and I've started to make a hole in there with a body reamer, and the wire on the winch, the power wire, is going to go through that hole. I need to make it a bit larger so I can get a JST connector through it. What I'm trying to achieve is so that I can take the bumper off with the winch that's going to be bolted onto it. So I should just be able to unplug the JST connector here and then take this whole winch assembly and bumper out. So I'm just about to wire the JST connector onto the power output from the BEC. I only need the black and red wires, so I'm going to bring this white one back and I'll cut that off later. A little tool tip, if you haven't seen one of these devices before, obviously I need to take some insulation off these wires. If you don't have one of these, it's an automatic wire stripper. Save up if you can and get yourself one. They are such a time saver. You just put the wire through the jaws, squeeze, and it strips the wire off, and it always grips and does a perfect cut. They're absolutely fantastic. So wires ready to solder on. JST connectors you can get from all over the place. I buy mine on eBay, model shops and so on. Will be fine for it. Before I wire up the JST connector, I'm just going to test out that this BEC is still working okay and all the connections are alright. So I'm just poking some bare wires into the battery connector there. Be careful you don't short things out. And I've got a digital multimeter connected onto the other side of the BEC, and if I touch that onto the end here, there we go, we've got a nice just under 6 volts, so the BEC's working absolutely fine. That's good to solder. Right, after the odd singed fingertip, I've now got all of the main power wiring done. So what you're looking at here is a big loom that connects into two Dean's connectors. I started off just by tie wrapping them together, and around the back here I've used some little strips of copper. You can get these little copper strips that you can solder to make your own battery packs up. I've cut those down just to bridge across the two connectors on the back, and then soldered all that on. So we now have a parallel connector, so I can put one battery pack into the truck, or I can put two in parallel. That then runs down, and three wires come off. One is the main power wire to the ESC. The second wire goes through to the winch controller, the 3 racing winch controller, and the third wire goes to this Novak Beck. Right, a few days later, right, a few seconds for you. Lots has been happening on the final fit of the wiring. We've got the ESC, all the power wires for that permanently wired and tie wrapped down now. You can see we've got tie wraps fixing those wires onto the rear battery tray. My super duper parallel power connector there is mounted on using two of these tie wrap mounting posts onto the floor pan. That's held down, it's loose but held down. We've got the Beck to be stuck up there. I've closed the lid finally on the receiver box, and that's Plastidip around the edge just to keep the water out of that. The winch is finally fitted. I'll be doing a separate video on how I got the winch installed, but there's the wire going through. That's going to sit under the front battery tray just like that. So I'm just about to do the 3 racing LED controller. I've wrapped that up in some electrical insulating tape, because it dips inside with all the dip switches and connectors. If you Plastidip that, the Plastidip would shrink and kind of split around the edges inside there, and you'd be doing probably 3 or 4 coats to get that nicely coated. It's much better if you've got an awkward shaped object, wrap it in tape so it's reasonably flat on each side, then I can just dip that straight away. Alright, so it's dipping time. I've got my helping hand set up ready to hold this for once it's dipped, and obviously bits of kitchen towel all over the place ready to catch stuff. You see I've tie wrapped the cables coming out here. I'm going to dip up to there. Tie wrapping at the end of where you're dipping is a really good idea, because when you've got the Plastidip dry, you don't want movement at the end of what's been dipped, otherwise it's going to split the rubber. So I find if you Plastidip up to where you've cable tied, then you end up with a really strong exit for the wires. Right, apart from having a gooey thumb, which I'll wipe off in a moment, that's the 3 racing controller done. Here we are the next day. The 3 racing LED controllers dried. I've dabbed a few more bits of Plastidip around the corners, that's looking sealed up. Various radio wire joints are drying with a second coat of Plastidip, so's the winch cable. While I'm waiting for the Plastidip to dry, I thought I'd move on to mounting some of the LEDs. I'm going to do a separate video on the lighting of the whole truck, but thought I'd do the bumper LEDs now. Because I'm driving these LEDs off of some switched Hey-OK LED controllers, I'm going to be passing 6 volts out of the Hey-OK LED controllers to them, and there's no resistors in there at the moment, so that could be far too much current, they'd blow the LEDs up. So for the front I've got two 5mm white LEDs, and they're going to go into the bumper. Annoyingly, this is the 2012 Jeep Rubicon kit. It doesn't have instructions for mounting LEDs or all of the parts. I downloaded this from axialracing.com/instructions, and this is for I think it was a Dingo Builders kit. And you can see here the LED goes into the bumper, and then they've got this piece of plastic that goes onto the back with a screw. Now I don't have that or that, but I did look in my kit, and off of one of the sprues for the bumper, also the sprue that has little pieces of black plastic to go on your body clips, you get this this little piece of plastic here, and that is actually to fit onto the Poison Spider bumper. There's no screw, so I had to get some 2mm by 2mm diameter and 6mm long Allen screws. They will go into this black plastic part. They go, I'm trying to put the LED in first just so you can get an idea of what's going on. LED goes in the bumper, and then this part here, the slot on this piece of plastic, goes over the LED legs, the wires that come out, and then that will screw on there. So there are parts in the Rubicon kit to fit it, as long as you've got some 2mm screws. The resistors, just in case anyone's interested, the front resistors, each LED is going to have a single resistor on it, 150 ohm resistors, and on the back I'm going to run these two. These are red ones, so they don't drop so much voltage. There's going to be one of these going through to the next one in series, and then one single 120 ohm resistor. Right, a little bit of soldering later. I've got two LEDs wired up now with their resistors. These are the front LEDs with 150 ohm resistors. I've bent the legs on the LEDs so that when they go into the bumper, they go in from the back, they'll be going at about there. You can see that they'll kink and actually run round the back of this post, so the wires will come out in the middle here. That way I'll be able to put heat shrink tubing on them and have that all tucked away nicely around the back of the bumper in there, and you won't see it until the wire just comes out in the middle, and that'll be one single black heat shrinked bit of wire, so nice and stealthy. I've almost got all the wiring in place and fixed down now. As you can see, most of the model is a load of black, which is just everything being Plastidip. I've mounted the 3 Racing LED controller now, and all the power cables are finally routed. The 3 Racing controller down here. Originally I was going to have all the kind of signal wires on this side of the model, power down here. Hasn't worked out like that in the end, just because of the way cables wanted to run and the good places to put things. So what I'm doing right now is this bunch of tiny wires here. These are all the circuits for the LEDs. So the main lights, brake lights, indicators and so on. These all need to be fed up to the body shell. And the way I'm going to do that is with this here. It's one half of a 10-pin connector. Goes together like that. And what I'm going to be doing is basically soldering all these together and remembering to put the heat shrink tubing on first before you solder them. I had soldered half of these yesterday and didn't put the heat shrink tubing on, so I've unsoldered them all, and I'm going to do them all again. So that will give me like an umbilical cord that will go all the way up to the body shell, easy to plug in and unplug. And the other thing I've been fiddling with, I haven't quite put this on yet. If you look at the front battery tray, I haven't got the top on, but there's the plastic cage for it. Now you see here, it's actually pushing the Proline Racing floor pan, this radiator, it's pushing it forwards. Things don't line up properly there, so I need to come up with a solution to get this plastic cage and mount it back about just under 1 centimetre. And the other thing for the update is this lump here. This is the parallel power connector. This has got 2 Dean's connectors in there. I was trying to find a good place to put that where it would sit down low and not end up rubbing on the body once the Rubicon body is installed. I was going to have it sticking out here, but there was nothing to hold it down very well. What I've done is actually I've put a long, I think it's a 30mm Allen bolt through there with some spacers. So I've now got a lump here that I can just wedge the connector under. Just give you a close up on that. So it's just a lump coming off the top of the central transmission, and power cables go under there, and that gives me a nice cable run for both battery packs. Right, so here's the umbilical cord soldered up now, and just the fine heat shrink over individual wires for insulation, and then I'll be bringing this thick heat shrink down to cover all of that and shrinking that on to give it some mechanical strength. Now this 10-pin connector here will be doing most of the lights on the body shell, except the indicators, which I've run on a separate couple of connectors here. So once the heat shrink's set on here, I'll be Plastidipping the ends just to improve the waterproofing. Here's the umbilical cord, as it's got it all nicely heat shrinked up, and we've got the Plastidip drying also on the mini umbilical cord for the indicator LEDs. That's all sealed up now, and I've just fitted some tiny brackets. I wanted to show you for relocating the front battery tray, which was touching on this floor pan. You can see I've just made out of some aluminium block, just these little metal plates. They just bring the screw hole 8mm towards the rear of the truck, so it's drilled straight through with a 3mm hole to go into the existing mount points, and then drilled out with a 2mm hole and then tapped out to 3mm as a 0.6 thread pitch. And then this bracket will sit down on the revised hole positions like so. I'll just hold it in place for now, and you can see that sits further back, and it's now clearing the bulkhead here. And finally, for your viewing pleasure, here is the front battery tray now mounted in its fractionally new position, clearing this bulkhead on the Proline floor pan. There we go, folks. After probably about 2 weeks of soldering and heat shrinking and plastidipping, I finally have all the wires installed. Oh, it's been a massive effort, but hopefully worthwhile. It's a bit of a mess over there. You're not going to make this kind of thing neat. We're squeezing a load of non-standard wiring into quite a small area. Thank goodness for the floor pan, otherwise I don't know where I would have put things. But the last few dabs of Plastidip are drying, and I'm hoping tomorrow when I come back from work I will go and stick this in some water. We've got the front LEDs mounted there, and the back ones, I'll show you them working in just a moment. We've also got the winch finally mounted, which I'm very pleased about. Lights themselves, we've got, let's move this back a bit. We've got on the sticks, if I nudge this one forwards, we've got main lights there. Obviously they're going to be on the body shell on this umbilical cord. If I pull the stick back, I've got the bottom lights. I'm going to have those as fog lights. Then I've got another lighting circuit here that's going to be, I can go medium dim, quite dim and off. They're going to be roof rack lights. And then with the 3 racing controller, if I go into reverse, the reverse light coming on. Now, unfortunately the indicator lights and brake lights don't work at the moment because of a problem with this transmitter. This is transmitting with a frame rate of 22.5 milliseconds, and that's not going to work with the 3 racing controller, the LED controller that's 5 to 20. Hey ho. But yeah, everything else is ready to rock and roll. So in the next episode, where there's a link up here, when I've finished it, you will see this going underwater for a test run. Hope you've enjoyed this video. I know it's been a bit long and a bit technical, but hopefully it's been useful. Any comments or questions, please do post them down below. Thanks for watching.